Hi folks, you're with Tacitus today. Tacitus today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about something that this is massively dystopian, and I hope you share this video as widely as you can, assuming you like it. What we're looking at here is how the courts in the Western world, where the globalists are in control, have been increasingly turned into devices of oppression to silence any dissent, any questioning of the globalist project, and anything that particularly brings into doubt the legitimacy of the globalist project and the legitimacy of the flunkies they put in place to implement the globalist project. Now, the definition of an ideological government is that you don't have a free press. The press is controlled by the narrative, pumping out the narrative, which is the same in all sort of totalitarian regimes, like the Soviet Union, even China today, North Korea, Cambodia, and during Pol Pot, and so on. So you don't get to choose the people that govern you. And you don't get to choose. And if you don't get to choose the people that govern you, you then question the legitimacy of government. That has to be stopped by not allowing anyone to have a voice and thus media control. But let's look at the court system. The rule of law, due legal process, as I've mentioned in many videos now, just get in the way of the globalist project, and they want it gone. And they want to be able to turn, or have turned, I should say, that the entire concept of jurisprudence in the West, they've turned it into an ideological type of law. So, relative victimhood of the people and that sort of thing can determine outcomes. But really, it's gone a whole lot further than that. We've got activist judges, you've got activist prosecutors, and activist lawyers, and there's a very good chance, if not a greater likelihood, that the lawyer that's representing you is also controlled and a member of or has been terrorized and stood over by the deep state. So when you go to court for something like a January 6th or whatever, the chances are that you're not really going to have any legal representation. And the judge will be an activist who's already been pre-instructed by the deep state to make sure you go to prison. The prosecutor, now, that's still, there still needs to be some evidence, you say, but minor misdemeanors have been turned into high crimes, serious high crimes. So let's look at how that's done, and that's really the purpose of this video, this essay, to discuss how that's done. And the pattern is very totalitarian, again, whether it's the Soviet Union or China or anywhere, the pattern is the same. Nazi Germany using against the Jews, but it goes like this. So let's suppose you spit on the sidewalk, and that, how can that be turned into a high crime that involves you going to prison for many years? It's impossible, right? All I did was spit on the sidewalk. So, but it goes like this. So, okay, Billy Bob, you spat on the sidewalk, but there was a black lesbian that was less than 500 yards away from where you were, and that lesbian may have seen you spitting on the sidewalk. And we say that the reason you spat on the sidewalk was it was a racial slur against that black lesbian 500 yards away. And that was your intent, to make a racial slur. And that means you're inciting racial hatred, which means you've committed a hate crime against black people, and racism, and homophobic, and hate crimes carry a minimum of 3 years in prison. So, well, wait a minute. Well, how do you know it's hate crime? Well, no, we say that was your intent. We can just allege it. Now, your lawyer, and I'll come back to that in a minute, doesn't really put up much of a defense. So by getting an irrelevant misdemeanor, but asserting that you have evil intent, racist, homophobic, transphobic, whatever. They don't. And then they reverse the burden of proof, and so we say that we don't need to have evidence. We need just to say it. Now the burden of proof is now on you to disprove it, to say that that intent was not in your heart or not in your thoughts, or you weren't considering those things, which is pretty much impossible to do. Now, it's impossible for them to prove that you did, but that's not how it works anymore. It doesn't work that way anymore, that they have to prove you had that intent. Well, you spat on the sidewalk, the black lesbian was 500 yards away. That proves you did it, you fucking Nazi. So that's it. They can now assert you had certain thoughts in your mind, and then they can connect that with any minor misdemeanor. So you were in Washington on January 6th. That means you intended to overthrow the government. You're insurrection, and you're a fucking Hitler. Prison for you, motherfucker. So they can do this, and this is the new form of jurisprudence. Now let's come to your lawyer. Now, lawyers used to be, to a large extent, it was considered how things were done, that the lawyer was to do everything they could to represent their client successfully, to explain the law to the judges, to point out the relevance of this law or that law or this precedent or that precedent. And those skilled in the law and putting forward persuasive arguments and who were prepared to do the hard yards in hitting the books and so on, and looking at the legal precedents and that sort of thing, would be effective lawyers. So, but that's changed now. That's not how it is. And I noticed this with lawyers working in the divorce courts, which I'll cover in a moment. But this is effectively how it works. The government has decided, because increasingly the use of courts is now for political reasons, ideological and political reasons, not did you or did you not break the law, or did you or did you not transgress or not transgress, or this. That's not what it is anymore. If the government can say, well, we say that you had this in your heart, or these thoughts are in your mind when you spat on the sidewalk, that means you are now a racist, a Nazi. As long as they do that and are doing it and are prepared to do it, which they are, then that changes the whole paradigm, changes the whole structure of jurisprudence, which it has. We're talking a different jurisprudence today than the one that existed, even 10 years ago, and certainly from 20 years ago, with the exception of some boutique ideological courts such as the divorce courts. So really, the lawyer is going to get a phone call. Lawyer represents you is going to get a phone call. Look, Jimmy Jack, we understand you're representing Billy Bob in this case, and but we need to win this. We want to win this case, and we want this. We don't want too much trouble here. We don't want, if you give a spirited defence, even though the judge is going to decide in our favour, it may mean that'll give grounds for an appeal. So we want you to roll over on this one. If it was a boxing match, it's the equivalent of you taking a dive in the first round. That's what we want you to do. Just roll over and try and pretend with your client that you are representing them and so on, but don't try too hard on this. We need you to roll over. We've got the state is putting, the government, local state government is putting up a number of contracts for legal services soon, and I understand your name is on that, and you just want to congratulations to getting on that list, and I'm sure you'll get some work out of that, which will set you up very nicely. I'm just thinking, though, says the person to the lawyer, the mysterious caller, we've also got a committee that's investigating malpractice in the law, and there's some of our friends are on that committee, and they'll be rooting out lawyers that are engaging in malfeasance, or what we say is malfeasance, and even if a lawyer isn't struck off the record, which they probably will be, even if they're not, their name will be mud around town and they'll never get any work. So I wouldn't like to think your name would be on that, Jimmy Jack. But I'm sure they wouldn't investigate you. There'd be no need, would there? Now, just coming back to this decision, we want you to, you understand that we need you to roll over on this. It's very important to us, and the governor has said so. And yes, I understand. Now, that lawyer is a choice now where they can either do what they're told and roll over and not represent their client, as they're required to do, by the way, and not represent their client, or represent their client so badly that the case is obviously lost big time. The client doesn't know this, of course. They don't know that their own lawyer is screwing them, but if they don't roll over, then now if they do roll over though, then they'll they're promised lots of government work, and they'll do very nicely, thank you, out of that. But if they don't roll over, then they're being threatened with, you'll be struck off the record. You'll never work in the legal profession again. And for someone of that lawyer's age and so on, the chances of them finding a new career are very slim. I mean, it's not impossible, but very unlikely. It's not easy to start again when you're 40 or something. But anyway, that's so it's made regular. So these are things going in the background. Now I noticed this in the divorce courts there, where lawyers that don't toe the line and don't sell out their own clients, which they do there, and do willingly and happily and without even a second's thought. And I've sat, been at lunches and dinners with lawyers and so on, where they're divorce court lawyers, where they think it's quite funny about how their gullible client thinks that the lawyer is representing them, when in reality the lawyer is representing the state. Representing the ideological outcome that's predetermined, and yet charging these guys, thousands of dollars a day to represent them in court, while they're making no effort to represent them, or no effort. They're not even trying to win the case. They're just trying to convince the gullible client that it's been a decent sort of process. That I went to court and I lost. I suppose I better do what the judge says. So they try and legitimize the financial raping of men by going through this process with a lawyer that's not even representing their male client. It's insane. Now, it also goes to other things, where the divorce courts use what they call family reporters or court reporters. I think the name differs depending on the jurisdiction, but where, say, a social worker or a psychologist, someone like that, is meant to interview the members of the family and say, well, clearly, the father is a wicked, evil, fascist, Nazi, wife-beating, pedophile, oppressor, and the woman is without blemish. Sainthood is about to be conferred upon her. And so the judge can say, well, look at this report. I've got no choice. The experts have said I've got no choice but to give custody to the woman and to screw the living financial shit out of the guy. I've got no choice. This is the report. The report says so. And so this is now any one of these psychs that doesn't toe the line and does reports that heavily favour the man and don't favour the woman. Any of them that do that, outside of a couple of acceptable things, like if she's in full-time drug rehab, then that's acceptable. But otherwise it's not. So 99.3% of the reports say that the father's an abusive so-and-so and the mother's a saint. Now, any psych, and again I've spoken to them, any psych that doesn't toe the line on this will suddenly find they're getting zero work. I mean, zero work out of the divorce court system, and because they reliably say all men are Nazis, they're given a lot of work, and some of these guys can make over $1 million a year doing these reports. So, and these are people who in the real world wouldn't even be making 10% of that. So they're doing very nicely, thank you. But all that will dry up if they don't toe the line. So all these various pressures, particularly where the government is the main client or the only client, really, they can be really intimidated and stood over by the government. And we see this in the United States, where lawyers representing Trump and Rudy Giuliani and those sort of people, it's really hard for them to get lawyers. because any lawyer that represents them is going to get a phone call or a quiet note saying, hey, you're never going to work in this town again. So this sort of intimidation and deep state threatening is becoming more and more widespread. And it's even at a point now where no one even thinks it's surprising anymore. 20 years ago, this would have been beyond outrage. It would have been, it would have been insane. People would have gone insane just thinking about the illegality of this and the breach of confidence and trust and all that sort of stuff. But it's not now. It's almost accepting, that's kind of how it is. Yeah, it's not nice, but that's just how it is. Let's move along. There's not really much to see here. So what we need to understand, the legal system has changed in this way where, and we see it was January 6th, where the deep state can assert, activist prosecutors, activist judges and so on, can just assert, well, you spat on the sidewalk because your intention was to commit racism and transphobia. And these are serious crimes, and we, the police, when they raided your house, or the SWAT team, they said they found 10 million swastikas, and we have a witness that says you had, tea with Hitler yesterday, so prove you didn't do it. Well, Hitler's been dead for 80 years or so. How could I have had tea with him yesterday? Oh yeah, have you got his dead body in the court now? Have you got his dead body right here now? You don't? Yeah. Well, you can't prove you didn't have to with Hitler, which means you did it, which means you're a fucking Nazi. So they can play all these games where they can raise the burden of proof to astonishing levels. You need Hitler's dead body in the court now, otherwise we don't accept he's dead. That sort of stuff. And so this is completely changed the administration of justice. But what it means is they can go after anybody they don't like politically using this sort of methodology. Now, when you talk to activists, whether it's people not long out of law studies or any sort of activist, they consider this sort of stuff is perfectly fine if you're going after people you don't like. Well, what would you think if someone was doing it to you? Well, they wouldn't do it to me because I'm a good, virtuous person. We're only doing this to the Nazis. We're only doing this to them, which means we're allowed to. So they have this infantile view that this couldn't be turned against them one day. They conceive it as impossible. I haven't done anything Nazi-ish. It couldn't happen to me, without understanding the material point that they're accusing people of doing things they haven't done and using assertion of intent, not even having to prove it. Now, we even saw this in the court cases that were to disrupt Trump's first term, and the agenda there, where the activists could go to find an activist judge and activist lawyers with an activist DA and all that sort of stuff, and they could get activist juries. I'm stunned at how easy it is to put together an activist jury in the United States. Absolutely unbelievable. But they can put all this activist stuff together and then get something to court in an emergency hearing. They can lodge paperwork and they can get the activist judge to hear the case the next day. I mean, is it that urgent that the judge is willing to, that they don't give those sort of emergency hearings to anyone else? Why do the activists get this? But again, we're talking the deep state here. So what they do and how it works with, well, in the case of stopping Trump's administration, they said, well, the reason Trump's putting this thing in place to stop the illegal aliens isn't actually to stop illegal aliens. It's because he's racist. That's why. Well, what evidence do you have he's racist? Well, he said something in a political rally once, and we assert that his intent was racist. I mean, holy fuck, you can go into court with something that flimsy, but it worked. And oh yeah, well that's it. And once that's asserted and intent is asserted, then connected with something else, by the marrying the two together, they can turn a factual event into an ideological event, which is what they do, and they're doing this wide. A lot of the stuff that held up Trump's policies then were using this methodology. And if there's any reform of jurisprudence that's required, it's this, that allowing these activists, because this is their game. This is their game to say, well, we can assert intent, don't have to prove it. We can assert it, and then reverse the burden of proof at the same time. Now, if they actually had to prove intent, which is almost impossible in most cases, or almost any case, I think, to say, well, this was exactly what you're thinking when you did this, is quite absurd. So if there was any review of jurisprudence, from say the Supreme Court in the US, that would be one that I would consider a priority, because this is the main weapon they're using to go after the January 6th people, to go after anybody they want, and the deep state, Justice Department, the abuse of law and the abuse of state power is so widespread and getting bigger by the day, that this really needs to have a reckoning. And I think this is an essential part of that reckoning. You've been a task today, your Pushback channel. Thank you for listening.